Famcast Media. Bitch.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, persons of all ages, welcome to the most exclusive group in the wrestling community. And now, your hosts, first, from Oahu, Puerto Rico, Macho Rodriguez, and his tag team partner from Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada, God's gift, Tyler Taylor! ¿Cómo estamos? Welcome to an edition of Carpod. Unfortunately, I will be doing this episode by myself as Tyler is still in Canada. So, guys, let's talk about some wrestling issues. I wanted to start off with Swerve Strickland. The reason I want to start off with Swerve is because I feel like he's undervalued. Let's talk about this. Wrestling Mark, who is a person who tweets a lot and talks a lot about percentages, and he breaks down the minutes of women's wrestlers and the women's matches, as well as overall wrestling on each show. Every week we get two special tweets. One, this is he breaks it down as in AEW, Rampage, Collision, Dynamite, WWE Raw, SmackDown, and so on and so forth, with TNA as well, where he breaks down and says total wrestling time. And he also does the same thing in terms of women. Like, he breaks down by television show and tells us which company has the most amount of women's matches. I always found this is super valuable because it helps me for the rest of the week to pay attention to what I had just witnessed. And recently, he just tweeted about Swerve Strickland and how Swerve Strickland had the highest rating of any talent on AEW in terms of promo. That his segment was the most watched of any wrestler in AEW. And I thought that was super interesting because I felt as if it wasn't being valued enough. And we need to talk about how this right here has turned into one of these things where we're not valuing guys like Swerve Strickland. We're not valuing guys like Adam Page or other wrestlers and so on and so forth. I think it's super important that Swerve can come out and cut a promo with Hangman Adam Page and is the highest viewed segment, almost like people tuned in because Swerve was on the screen. I've always kind of had this feeling that Swerve was completely underutilized. And I also feel as if Swerve himself is super valuable in the sense that he brings so many people out of market to professional wrestling. Because he has a music career, if, let's say you or I don't like professional wrestling, but we love Swerve enough and we love his music, and we're like, hey, Swerve has a segment on Dynamite. I'm going to turn on Dynamite at that moment to just watch that man and what he's bringing to the table. I think it's super important because guys like him don't get the shine that they should get. And I wanted to talk about why he may not be being used the proper way in AEW. Back in 2021, on December 31st, there was this wrestling pundit who works under the site Wrestling Incorporated. And on there, they interviewed Big Swole. And Big Swole said there's not enough diversity in AEW. And I thought that was super interesting because at the time, a lot of AEW wrestlers, women and men alike, all came out and said that the company is great. There's no issues with diversity. And there were people trying to poke holes. Like, oh, Ricky Starks is the FTW champion. He is a person of color. So I think this is BS. We have Jade Cargill, who's the TBS champion. So she's holding the mid-card title. And there was so many people trying to poke holes in what Big Swole was saying. But for some reason, everybody took this at face value. Oh, well, it can't be true because all of these wrestlers are coming out against Big Swole. She's just not talented. And I don't think that was the case. Sure, you can think whatever you want about Big Swole, the character. But what Big Swole did, I like to think about it as it's a great message by the wrong messenger. Unfortunately, because Big Swole is not super known in wrestling circles, she got berated about the usage in AEW. And most recently, I tweeted about this. And most recently, I also did a TikTok video about it. And one of the commenters actually said to me, well, Leo Rush backed her up, was the only wrestler that backed her up. And soon after Big Swole's release, Leo Rush was let go from AEW as well. And I thought to myself, damn, that's got to mean something. And slowly but surely, we have seen that AEW hasn't utilized their superstars correctly. We haven't had them in the limelight. We have Keith Lee, Powerhouse Hobbs, Shane, Swerve Strickland, and they're just not used on television. They're not used in title matches. And I thought to myself, wow, why is this happening in AEW? And the only thing I could come up with is that somebody, whoever the producers are or whoever the writers are for storylines, decided at some point that these superstars weren't valuable enough to the brand that they're trying to show the world. I think that's an issue, guys, because as we've seen and as wrestling fans are coming out of the woodworks to talk about, Swerve is one of those guys that we want to see in the spotlight, whether it's the TNT title, obviously there's no TBS title, the FTW title, the tag titles, the world title, and they're just not being used. He's not even being used in the Ring of Honor scene. He's never wrestled Cesaro for the Ring of Honor Championship. He's never wrestled Samoa Joe for the TNT Championship or for the TV Championship. He's never wrestled Shibata for the Pure Championship. This guy is being completely held away from the title picture. Now, I had this great person who runs her own podcast called The Anti-Wrestling Fan. Her name's Shayna. She actually said that Swerve prefers it this way. He prefers to be able to go home to his family. He prefers to have the type of schedule that he has. But sometimes, just sometimes, and I want to go back and use a specific example, I think that there are important factors in this. Like when Bryan Danielson came into AEW, he was the hottest character in professional wrestling at the time. He had just main evented WrestleMania with Roman Reigns and Edge. He had just had a loser leaves WWE match with Roman Reigns. You know, this dude was a main event player in WWE. He comes into your company, albeit right after Adam Cole, so you have two debuts at once, and he jumps right into a match with the AEW champion, Kenny Omega. They headline Arthur Ashe Stadium, which was the first time AEW had done Arthur Ashe Stadium. And then after that, he kind of isn't in the main event scene again. He's just relegated to the middle of the card. And this was to the dismay of a lot of wrestling fans. And I didn't really understand why AEW didn't strike while the iron was hot. At the time, I made a TikTok about this and said this was the biggest fumble since Eric Bischoff getting Bret Hart in the building after the Montreal Screwjob and not immediately making him a featured player in WCW. Now, obviously, Eric Bischoff has went on to say that the reason he did this with Bret was because Bret was just angry. He was upset. He didn't come in with ideas. He just wanted a payday and he would go home. He wanted to show up late. However it worked out, you can check that out on 83 Weeks Podcast, as they call it, in their archives. There's a great Bret Hart episode. It's one of their very first episodes. But getting back to Swerve, the reason that I think that he's very similar to Bryan Danielson and how he came into the business is because when Swerve came in, the news that broke was that WWE was very upset that they lost him. They were upset because Stephanie McMahon had considered Swerve her favorite superstar in WWE. And she didn't need to say this. He was working for another company. But she let the cat out of the bag and told everyone, Swerve is my favorite superstar. So I wonder to myself, if Swerve stays in WWE, is Hit Row considered an enhancement talent? Or is Swerve brought in to be like the next Bobby Lashley, Booker T, and he's utilized the way he's supposed to be? in the Intercontinental Championship picture, in the United States Championship picture? Does he tag with Hit Row? Do we have a New Day resurgence? However it works, he definitely could have been used better in WWE. I wonder if AEW just doesn't know how to use their talent correctly. And I just can't trust Tony Khan because, as I've said this before, and I will continue to hearken on this, as long as backstage politics and backstage storylines become more prominent over the stuff we're seeing on television, I felt as if Tony Khan is not running the company correctly because people care more about CM Punk and him being out for a 9-month absence. I mean, the guy was one of the most popular superstars in AEW and he wasn't even on television. He was suspended and he was dealing with an injury. Why does CM Punk missing from programming, why does that matter more to fans than what they're watching on television? Because the stuff they're watching on television is tired, old shit. So I wonder if maybe somebody in AEW has a sit down with Swerve Strickland and says, hey, right now you're the highest rated segment. Let's try this for the next month. You keep coming in, cutting these promos. Maybe you'll work one match in a month. Let us see what you have. Let us see if we can gain traction about this. We have seen such companies use certain moments like this to see how it works. WWE, their most famous time for using this was the match that didn't happen on Monday Night Raw. They put Chris Jericho in the ring with Triple H. And I don't know if you remember the storyline, but it was on Monday Night Raw, and Chris Jericho had hired the APA to bar everyone from ringside, almost like exactly what they were, the Acolyte Protection Agency. Chris Jericho goes out there, he wins the World Heavyweight Championship. Obviously, he has to relinquish the title and give it back to Triple H, and the match never happens. Today, anybody who loves wrestling, anybody who loves kayfabe, they all say the same thing. Well, that match never happened. But we clearly know that that's just a part of the story. So I ask you, should someone in AEW decide that with what we just saw Swerve Strickland do, with the promo he just cut, because there was a lot of truth to his kayfabe promo. There was a lot of truth to it. Had Hangman Adam Page not been given the opportunity over and over and over, is Swerve not better off in this company? Is he not a top guy? Would he not be the first black champion in AEW history? Or right now, am I being worked? Is this the plan? Is he the guy who's going to take the title off of MJF? I guess we won't know, and we won't know for the next couple of weeks. So moving on. I wanted to say this because I got a lot of backlash on this, and I was wondering what everybody here thought. So, mi gente, let me ask you, is MJF's shtick tired? Are we done with his style of promo? Are we done with his style of professional wrestling? Because it feels to me like he hasn't won a promo battle in a very long time. Now, I know there's old school wrestling fans who love Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage, and I love Macho. I mean, I'm Macho. That's my name, Macho Rodriguez. But I just want to tell you, those old promos don't work nowadays. Sure, some of them still resonate. Some of them still hold up. The cup of coffee in the morning. The cream always rises to the top. The tear in my eye. Those promos still resonate with professional wrestling fans, and they still matter. They remind us of a time when wrestling was so important that it might be the only thing you're watching in any given night. And I wonder to myself, does AEW have that with their current AEW World Heavyweight Champion? Is he the guy that can carry the next fan base over? Because to me, he's tired. I mean, that dude is whack. There's nothing he's saying, there's nothing he's doing that's believable to me. He doesn't feel like a superstar who resonates with fans anymore. I think in the beginning, he had a really great idea. Let me go out here, let me just say a bunch of work shoot stuff, because that's AEW's thing, is to do the work shoot. So he's doing a bunch of work shoot stuff, and we see that right now, people care more about Adam Cole, baby. They care more about Bryan Danielson in the BCC. They care more about Orange Cassidy. MJF is in the middle of the card. Sure, he's made really hot take comments when they've asked him why he wasn't main eventing over Jon Moxley. And he said, do you think I really want to wrestle in a ring that's full of Jon Moxley's blood? Sure. At the time, that seemed believable. It was like, yeah, Moxley bleeds all the time. Why in the hell would anybody want to work in that environment? But now it's starting to really stick out. MJF isn't in the main event anymore. And although I thought that the match up until the Dusty finish was very good, it wasn't the match of the night at AEW All In. I mean, it really wasn't. When we go back and watch what happened, that show, it had really good matches, but really subpar matches. AEW All In was okay, to say it best. It really was indie-rific. I'm going to credit Eric Bischoff with that term. But it wasn't the best. Now, AEW All Out was phenomenal. I hope I said that correctly. I feel like I just confused my words. AEW All In was mid. AEW All Out was phenomenal. That's what I'm trying to say. So please, excuse me if I misspoke. I feel as if MJF is just growing old and getting stale. Even his promo most recently with Samoa Joe, it's the same thing over and over and over. You didn't appreciate me when I was a worker coming up. I'm the top guy in this company right now. I just wrestled in the top main event in this company's history. It was the highest rated match, or the biggest fanfare for this match. But it is always the same thing. It's always about not being appreciated, and then he goes out there and he can't stop himself. I honestly believe that he just cannot stop himself from mentioning WWE. I would really like to hear your comments and questions. So please, hit me up at must_love_wrestling on Instagram, or hit me up at boricua.lou on TikTok. Let me know what you think, because this is really starting to stick out to me. Moving on, I wanted to talk about how AEW All In was a star-making pay-per-view. This pay-per-view, specifically to me, felt like it was all about the next crop of stars. We had Big Shane versus Samoa Joe. That match was all about making Shane. We had Ricky Starks versus Bryan Danielson. That match was led by Ricky Starks, and Bryan did everything to put Ricky over. Sure, Ricky didn't get the 1-2-3. Ricky didn't get the submission. But he definitely came out the winner of that match. Because at this point in his career, Bryan Danielson is not about that life. He probably never is going to hold his singles title in AEW ever. He really wants to be that guy who just pushes the next crop of stars. Another match I felt like did really good job of building stars was Orange Cassidy. I mean, let's look at what Orange Cassidy did for a second, guys. 31 straight title defenses, wrestling every and any style in pro wrestling. That's what he did. But he didn't do it in the way Shawn Michaels did. Shawn Michaels was able to do this, of course, because he is considered 1A or 1B in the greatest of all time discussion. But let's be very clear. Orange Cassidy did this as a white meat babyface. And in 2023, there are no white meat babyfaces that the crowd cares enough about. They just don't care about guys that much. It doesn't matter to them. So why was he able to resonate with fans for as long as he did? I mean, he's been working on this gimmick for 9+ years. I know a lot of people think that he came to AEW and he decided this is where I'm going to use Freshly Squeezed. No, guys. He's been doing this since his Shakara days. I wonder why Orange Cassidy resonates so much, because I know it looks like it's just a gimmick and it's corny, or however you feel about it. I personally think it's money. It is absolute money. When I watch Orange Cassidy, I see one of the best wrestlers walking the earth today. When I see him cut a promo, I feel to myself, holy crap, this dude can really talk. He can cut a babyface promo like Thugonomics John Cena, where he just brings you in. You believe every word he says. And I thought, wow, going out there and wrestling Jon Moxley in the match of the night, in their match at All Out in the main event, I felt like, hey man, This dude is more special than we're giving him credit for. And I honestly believe, and I got to say it's a little bit of hope, because I don't really trust Tony Khan and I don't really trust AEW. I feel to myself that he is headed for the main event scene. He has now officially become one of the guys in AEW that may or may not be a future world heavyweight champion. And I can just imagine him going out there, defending the world heavyweight championship, a la Seth Rollins. I'm going to go out there and defend it as often as possible. I'm going to challenge you for my title. And I think it'll work, guys. I really do. So what do you think? Am I right or am I wrong about Orange Cassidy? Did I miss something? Did I overthink it? I'd love to hear it. Questions and comments, let me know. Moving on to Jon Moxley. Has this guy not become the most polarizing figure in all of professional wrestling? It honestly feels like all anybody remembers in this prisoner of the moment mindset is that Jon Moxley himself is only a hardcore wrestler. Did you guys forget about the run he went on for 8 years in the WWE? Did you guys forget that when he first came to AEW, he was absolutely the top guy in the company? I mean, every time this guy holds a world title, we always see the tweet. We always see the photo. Right now, the Shield is running professional wrestling. Seth Rollins, World Heavyweight Champion. Jon Moxley, International Champion. Roman Reigns, Undisputed Universal World Heavyweight Champion. And I think to myself, this isn't the first time I saw this tweet. When Seth was the top guy in the business in WWE or the top guy on Monday Night Raw, he didn't need the title. And that's what people were saying. Right now, AEW has one of the top stars in all of professional wrestling. And if some people can see this on Twitter, some people can see this on TikTok, why are there so many toxic wrestling fans trying their best to poke holes at what Jon Moxley's done? I'm genuinely concerned with fan bases today. I feel like we've just gotten into this tribalism of pro wrestling where we're not paying attention to what's being put in front of us. We're not paying attention to the story. We're not listening to what's being told to us. And I'm wondering, is this just based on what we've seen in recent years where they just don't trust it? Or maybe are people starting to think what I'm thinking, that Tony Khan just doesn't know how to run his business? I'm very curious. I would love to hear this from you guys. So, mi gente, the one thing I wanted to do for you, since I've missed it for the past couple weeks, is give you a little bit of an intermission. So here goes. Today, in pro wrestling history, we have 40 years ago, Stan Henson defeated Giant Baba to win the Pacific Wrestling Federation World Heavyweight title. That's massive, guys. On this day in 1997, Stone Cold Steve Austin was hitting his stride. On Raw, he confronted Commissioner Sergeant Slaughter, the announcer Vince McMahon, as I do quotations. Slaughter was upset with Austin over his actions the previous night in Your House Bad Blood, when he interfered in Owen Hart's matches. Austin gave Slaughter a stunner, which the crowd ate up. In a few weeks, guys, from this segment, he would hit Vince McMahon with a stunner. That is massive. That is crazy. I also want to wish a happy birthday to one of the most, I would say, underappreciated stars ever in Raven. He turns 59 today, guys. 59. That is one of the craziest things we've ever seen. Also, let's not forget that one day ago, 32 years ago, Bret the Hitman Hart won the King of the Ring, defeating Erwin R. Shyster. A lot of people don't know this, but Bret Hart actually won the King of the Ring back-to-back years. Only on the second year was it a pay-per-view, and was it televised. My wrestling trivia of the day. Bryan Danielson lose in the main event in the final of the ECW Super 8 tournament? I'll give you a couple seconds. Are you ready? Low-key. That's right. Brandon himself. Low-key. That is one of the coolest matches I've ever seen, guys. I gotta be honest with you. The first time I watched it, I never thought to myself, Bryan Danielson was that dude until I saw him in person. But watching him versus Loki, a local guy, Loki being from Brooklyn, New York, and then coming to Jersey All Pro Wrestling, being the star in Jersey All Pro Wrestling, I thought, wow, this is one of the best matches I've ever seen. Also, my match of the week recommendation, guys, is Bryan Danielson versus Spanky in the opening match of that exact ECWA tournament. Guys, go back and watch it. If you can't find it, Bryan Danielson is wearing, for some reason, pink sweatpants during his match. But the match itself, guys, was fucking amazing. You have to give yourself an opportunity to go back and watch this match. And I promise you, you will not be disappointed. All right, coming back from intermission here, I wanted to bring something else up. Braun Breaker is a throwback wrestler. And no, I don't mean this because of who his father is. And I don't mean this because of who his uncle is. What I'm saying about throwback is because he wants you to hate him. This man absolutely, unequivocally wants you to think of him as the villain of all villains. Excuse me, guys. I am doing a Carpod, and I am officially parked nice and safe right before I go to work, and I wanted my windows down and shut off my air conditioning because gas prices are astronomical. I'm not going to tell you why they are. I don't give a shit why they are. They just are. Getting back to pro wrestling, getting back to Braun Breaker, now that I went on my little rant and my money-saving tip of shutting your air conditioner off and just sitting in your car idling with your windows down, I wanted to talk about Braun Breaker because what we watched him do to Von Wagner this week was spectacular. We have seen multiple angles of how it happened and how safe Von Wagner was. But one of the things that really stuck out to me was the way that segment was produced. We watched Braun Breaker lose his fucking mind and drop the steel steps on Von Wagner's head, only to have WWE release a visual of Von Wagner bleeding from his head, wrapped in bandages on a stretcher. I mean, what a segment, guys. And this brings me back to what I'm saying. Braun Breaker wants you to hate him. He wants you to feel about him the way you felt about Randy Orton in 2009. He wants you to feel about him the way you felt about Triple H when he joined the Authority. When he ran Evolution. We all hated Triple H then. Sure, there were those smart Mark fans that didn't care whether he was a good guy or bad guy. And I was that person because as a youngster, I loved Ravishing Rick Rude. I loved Mr. Perfect. I loved Macho Man Randy Savage. Bad guys, they were it. Big Boss Man, one of my favorites. Bam Bam Bigelow, one of my favorites. That's right. I'll talk about the underutilized superstars in a future podcast. But for right now, I just want to go back to the fact that wrestling is in its heyday right now. It is coming back. No, I'm sorry. It is back, guys. Professional wrestling is back. We officially have wrestling on almost every single night. We have stars all over the place. AEW Dynamite, AEW Rampage, AEW Collision, WWE Raw, WWE SmackDown, TNA, Total Nonstop Action, New Japan. We are getting such great programming from all companies. And this is possibly one of the best times to be a wrestling fan. I really want you guys to go back and just sit down, record some stuff, watch some of this work, talk about it with your friends, get the word out there about what we're watching, because honestly, guys, this is a special time to be a wrestling fan. So, mi gente, thank you so much for joining me this week on Carpod. Hopefully, next week, Mr. God's Gift, Tyler Taylor, from New Brunswick, Canada, will be back. But until next time, nos vemos, mi gente.